I give you my writer's journey, episode 3, Revenge of the Shelf. In Writer's Journey's episode 1, The Phantom Manuscript, and episode 2, Attack of the Critics, I told you about growing up as a writer, the various stories and novels that I drafted manuscripts of, and then my experience and advice dealing with critics and criticism. I'm glad that you're back for episode 3. If you've not seen episodes 1 and 2, feel free to pause, go to my writing advice playlist, and watch the others before this one. But either way, let's continue. This is Revenge of the Shelf. I've got two areas to talk about here. One is the shelf in the sense of reading too much as a writer, and the other is the shelf in the sense of letting go of those characters and manuscripts that have been sitting on the shelf that I feel so attached to. So let's deal with the first issue, which is I have to admit that as a writer, I use the excuse of, oh, there's so much left that I feel I need to read as a model in order to understand my genres or subgenres that I'm writing in, and in order to help give me the background that I need to feel like an expert so that I can really make my story the best that it can be. And that, unfortunately, ends up being a procrastination technique. So I will sound like a total hypocrite by sitting here and saying, okay, writers, we've got to stop doing this. We've got to stop just reading all the time and ignoring our writing. What happened to me, which happens a lot throughout the school year, is I got bogged down once again, being very busy with a lot going on. I had a nice healthy split back in November, December, with a nice share of reading time and writing time, but then I allowed the reading time in January and February and March and a lot of April to really take over, and I wasn't writing as much. I was spending a lot of time still on my outlining and my ideas and my note cards, but I have to admit I was relying more on reading than writing. So luckily what's happened is around the second half of April and during the month of May, I got back to writing. And oh, it feels so good. It feels so exhilarating to be able to say that I've been putting more words back down on the page. I'm happy about that, and I want to encourage other writers to have awareness of this issue when you see it happening, because it's one of those difficult balances to decide between being a reader and being a writer, because reading is fun in general. I love reading just for the sake of reading, but also I like to read in order to help with my writing. And I mean, come on, I don't need to read any more books at this point. I'm perfectly good. For the sake of writing, I don't need to read anything more. I know my ideas, I know what I need to get on the page, so it's good to acknowledge that. The second issue is, I talked about in episodes 1 and 2, but mostly episode 1, I have a bunch of old manuscripts, old drafts of stories, which are novels and novellas and screenplays that I've written with characters and stories in them, and I had to make myself psychologically be willing to let go of them. You know, there's a character that I've had in my head that I've been working on for a decade. I've been trying to tell his story for a decade, and I finally had to tell myself, just let it go. Write someone else's story, because if you've been working on a story like that as long as I have, you've got to realize when it's just not coming out of you the way that you want, and you got to move on to something else. So that's why I call it Revenge of the Shelf. Those old manuscripts that are sitting there on the shelf, beckoning you, calling you, trying to hypnotize and mesmerize you to keep working on them. Say, let them go, at least for now, okay? You may have to lie to yourself and say, oh, don't worry, character that I love, I'll come back to you soon. And not really come back to that character soon if need be, okay? Because there are plenty of other characters out there. You gotta move on sometimes to somebody new. And I know it can break your heart. That can be what's necessary. So here's my big announcement as a writer. In April and in May, I have been pulling short stories out of myself. Granted, I had some short stories that I was working on back in November and December, and I was able to at least rework some of those. But I've been looking online at different different publication opportunities, writing contests for just submitting short stories to them. And I'm very excited to say that that's what I've been doing. Though you may be surprised after some of my previous talk, because I often talk about how I'm conflicted between wanting to write sci-fi and fantasy or wanting to write modern coming-of-age mystery kind of novels. And a lot of these short stories I've been working on are horror. And I think that may just be because I have found a lot of really fascinating topics in these horror magazines and writing contests. And granted, some of them are modern mystery kind of settings for horror. Some of them are sci-fi and fantasy settings for horror. But I'm very happy to say I've got some really fun ideas for horror stories, and I've been enjoying writing them up. We'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to getting huge piles of rejection letters, rejection emails, potentially, as well as hopefully having some people say, yes, we like your stories and we will publish them in our magazines or websites or perhaps in an anthology or two or something. We will have to see what happens. But that's what's going on with me, May and June, trying to enter these contests and such. So if you're out there and you want to support me as a writer, please wish me luck and we'll see where it goes from there. Also, it is now summer vacation, which means I can get back to working on my novels. Oh, thank goodness. The school year can be such a distraction, but I can really focus on that now. I've got a large chunk a day to divide between reading and writing and, living life and doing other things. Very excited to say that. Hope you'll stick around with me because episode 4 is coming faster than you know it. Every day is a good day for a writing journey story or a book talk. Peace.